Hey there everyone. I know this review has been a long time coming. I meant to do it when the hall originally opened back in, October, but then I thought my camera was broken and then I might have to send it in, but then it turned out to be alright, but then there was a problem with Sony Vegas, my editing program, and then I just got distracted by this and that, but now I'm here to rectify that with my review of the new Hall of Life at the Raymond Alf Museum in Claremont, California, as part 2 of my Better Known Museum Month. So before we get started, let's just go with the interview that I did way back then with their curator of paleontology, Andrew Farkey. Roll it! Alrighty folks, Dr. Andy Farkey, curator of the Alf Museum, has agreed to interview us yet again. Thank you very much, Andy.
You're welcome.
Alrighty then, so the Hall of Life. Obviously this has been a long time coming. How does it feel to finally see this project come to fruition?
Oh, it's awesome. It was really spectacular to finally see the project come together, see everything, all the pieces fall into place, and I know that both I and Don Lofgren, who's our museum director, along with everyone else that helped out on the project, we just had a blast finally seeing this, this vision become reality.
Okay, because the museum kind of seems to take a more traditional approach, you can say. As a lot of museums today are taking a very modern approach and trying to do different things with it, but you went sort of the more traditional run, where you have the stuff in a chronological order, but you have science sprinkled throughout the entire exhibit very effectively. It just blends right in. How did you come up with this design plan, this layout for the hall?
Well, the design for the hall was led by, I think, Jacobson and Roth. That's a local Los Angeles exhibit company that's done work for a lot of different museums in the area and nationwide. And one of the things that, and they really, took the space that we had and made it come to life. Our big constraint here, which is both a bit, a constraint as well as an opportunity, is that the exhibit hall is circular, which means that basically we have a circular space is very different from a square or rectangle. That we don't have any corners. We have all these odd kind of shapes, and so the challenge was to make that space work. So we've kept the walk-through time approach, which is very effective. But broken that up with little nooks and crannies, a lot more depth to the feel of the exhibit. But beyond just the walk-through time, the other thing that we really wanted to do was follow Ray Alf's philosophy, Ray Alf being the founder of the museum, of putting each person, making them feel like they're part of that story, making them realize that they're not just an isolated speck in the universe, but we can trace our heritage back to the very beginning of everything.
Awesome stuff. Alright, next question. You obviously brought out a lot of new specimens, not just from the, not just a bunch of casts, but also from the museum collections. How do you choose what kind of specimen gets selected and you think will be best for an exhibit?
Well, there's really two factors that we look at. First of them is, is it a visually appealing specimen? We want stuff out there that a visitor, with maybe a little prompting from the signage can look at it and say, oh, I know what that is. The second thing is, we wanted to make sure all of our specimens fit into the overall story that we were telling. The history of life, the interconnectedness of life through evolution, the geological history of the Earth. So we chose specimens, and on that count, what's going to tell this little piece of the story that we want to tell.
Alright, a lot of museums like to brag about, how much original fossils they have on exhibit and, their rich collections and whatnot. Your exhibit utilizes a lot of casts. Now, obviously, casts can play an important part and, if treated properly, can make for an effective exhibit in place of a real specimen. So, how do you think about all that?
Yeah. Well, it depends a lot on the, again, this comes to the, what story do we want to tell. For instance, when we had, one of my favorite displays, both in terms of how it turned out in the end, as well as the fun that I had putting it together, was the tetrapod evolution exhibit, so talking about the origin of tetrapods. And we had original specimens for an early lungfish, as well as another early Sauropterygian called Eusthenopteron. But we didn't have any original specimens of some of the very earliest tetrapods, so we had to get a cast of the animal Tiktaalik to go along with that. So we tried to, really make, when we had casts, make them fit in as part of the overall story.
Now, there are some companies on the internet that you can buy fossil casts from. You know, obviously, they obviously got the rights to cast a specimen, they make molds of it and sell it. But what does it take to get a cast from a museum itself, especially if it may be a highly prized specimen?
Well, some of the casts we got were purchased from other museums or casting companies, and so basically we we coordinate with them. In some cases, they want to make sure that the cast is going to be presented appropriately, with the correct information. But it was really pretty straightforward, just a matter of making the contact.
Oh, okay then. Good to know. All right. What's your favorite specimen in the exhibit?
Oh boy, that's tough because I have a lot of favorite specimens. Probably my favorite cast is the cast and the life model of Tiktaalik, the early tetrapod that went in. For original specimens, though, probably my favorite, even though I'm a dinosaur guy, it's not the dinosaurs. It's I like the early saber-toothed cat, Dinictus. That's on display.
The saber-toothed bobcat.
Yes. Yep.
All right, because what seems to be particularly cast heavy is your dinosaur section.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a bit about the museum's dinosaur collections?
Yep. Yeah. So we have a pretty extensive collection of dinosaurs. But the downside is a lot of our original specimens for dinosaurs are maybe things that aren't they're isolated bones or parts of skeletons, things that wouldn't necessarily make a great display. So we filled in, for instance, with our Allosaurus cast, our Centrosaurus cast, really for the the big spectacular displays. But we still do have some original material. For instance, a partial hadrosaur skeleton that was collected by the museum in Montana.
On display over there.
Yep, on display over there, as well as a number of other smaller bones from our collections in Utah, Montana, and other places.
Alrighty then, because you're doing a lot of work right now in the Kaiparowits Formation of Utah, which is about 75 million years old. Why the Kaiparowits? Why would you choose to search from this particular formation, especially when a lot of museums are focusing heavily on the late Cretaceous Hell Creek Formation of Montana and the late Jurassic Morrison Formation of Utah?
Well, it basically boils down to our research questions, and we're really interested in understanding that slice of time from that part of the United States, because there's very little known about it. There's still lots of important work going on in the Hell Creek as well as the Morrison Formation, but there's even just the much more basic stuff that needs to happen in the Kaiparowits Formation. So we've been working with the University of Utah, the Bureau of Land Management, and other agencies and institutions to fill in some of the gaps.
All right, kind of going back to specimen selection. You have a cast of the skull of Diabloceratops, which is from the slightly older Wahweap Formation, about 80 million years old. So why did you go for Diabloceratops instead of, say, Utahceratops, which is known from the Kaiparowits?
Well, our Diabloceratops was actually it's a research cast in addition to being part of our display. So we wanted to, it was just kind of a targeted opportunity. We already had it in our research cast collection. It seemed like a cool specimen to put out on display.
And at 7 feet long, I imagine Utahceratops would have taken up more space.
Yeah, that's too. Although space wasn't really a factor in that one. It was just kind of what we had on hand.
Okay, kind of what we had. Do you think the museum might eventually branch out to other parts of the dinosaur world, different formations in different places?
Absolutely, hopefully. We don't know what the future will bring.
All right, well, hands off the Kirtland Formation. I call dibs.
Okay.
Or maybe I'll let you guys tag along if you let me tag along to Utah. Assuming I ever get out to the Kirtland, out there in the New Mexico. And we'll also, going back to sort of specimens and the museum's collections, there seems to be this sort of competitive atmosphere in the museum community. When the LA Museum opened their dinosaur hall, they were saying how it would rival, the greatest displays in the world. And so many times people talking about, who has the better fossil collection and whatnot. One person once told me, we were talking about the Smithsonian, and he mentioned that the American Museum has superior fossil collections. Now, because your guys' entire Hall of Life, could fit in the corner of some of these museums' exhibit halls. I mean, you probably take up like a third of just one of LA's dinosaur halls. So how do you feel about this, supposed competitive nature amongst museums and the Alf Museum's position in it?
Yeah, I think a lot of the competition comes more from the PR types than from the some of the other folks. And also, I think the important thing to remember is that every museum has its own niche. I mean, the American Museum has many great fossils. They have a very large collection. But small museums like the Alf often have specimens that just aren't, and kinds of specimens that aren't held anywhere else. For instance, we have a very unique focus on many of the fossils of Southern California, for instance from the Barstow Formation, as well as some other areas. So we have specimens and kinds of specimens that aren't on display anywhere else. So that's one of the unique things about a small museum, is we, in some ways, can really focus on the treasures of our collection.
And that's really helpful too, because maybe you don't have to fly all the way to New York. I mean, you may still have to for certain specimens, but if you want to look at some Barstow fossils, you don't have to fly all the way to New York to see their collection. You have a repository right here.
Exactly, yeah. And in some cases, for instance, our Centrosaurus skeleton, the original's on display in New York, but it's behind glass, and it's very difficult to get access to. So even though we don't have the original here, our cast is actually very useful as a research specimen.
All right, very good. Let's see, any other questions? A lot of these specimens, at least casts anyway, aren't behind plates of glass. Is there a reason for that, or do you just trust your visitors that much?
Part of it is, we're a small museum, so we have a little more leeway in leaving some specimens open. And that's probably the main thing, because we're a smaller institution, we don't have the high visitor traffic that a lot of places like the Los Angeles Museum do. We can maybe keep a closer eye on that thing, and also it just lets the visitor have a more intimate experience, closer experience to those fossils and to those casts.
Alrighty then. Any other questions? I'm just kind of doing these on the fly, but I've been thinking about them. Let's see. Sorry, folks, I'm just drawing a blank here. Oh yeah. Okay, because how do you feel about it? Some say that dinosaurs are almost kind of undergoing a second extinction because all these taxa from the Hell Creek Formation are being absorbed into previously established species. Because first it was Nanotyrannus into T-Rex, then it was Torosaurus into Triceratops, and apparently now Anatotitan and a couple species of Edmontosaurus have been lumped into two species of Edmontosaurus. What's your position just on this sort of mass lumping? Do you think they're right, or do you think that maybe that while some people may be splitting too much, like just naming every scrap of bone as a new species, or do you maybe think that we're maybe lumping too much? Or can we really say?
I would say in general the current trend is probably correct. I mean, I don't. There may be some details that we'll hash out a little more in the future, but I think in general, there are too many species for many of these dinosaurs. For instance, Nanotyrannus and T-Rex. So yeah, I think in general it's probably correct. Although I'm sure it'll be reevaluated too for many of these.
Well, if I can ever commission Kurt Hugo Schneider, we'll make a music video. Bye, bye, Anatotitan Copi. So, let's see, anything else? Anything else you want to add? Or, I got one. Okay. Most museums eventually outgrow their spaces, just not just exhibit-wise, but also for their collections. Do you think the Raymond Alf Museum will ever outgrow its current little rotunda museum and eventually maybe move into something grander?
Well, our exhibit spaces are what they are, and they actually do very well for what we do. But our next big area of space pinch is going to be with the collections. We're getting, in 10 years down the road or something, we may very well run out of space. So if there's anyone out there watching that wants to donate for a set of cabinet compactors, they're certainly welcome to.
Yeah, especially if the Kripe site yields a whole Tyrannosaur. Where are you going to keep that?
We'll find space. We always find space.
Yeah, maybe sometime down the road, if I can ever get into that sculpting class and learn how to make models and stuff, I can help you guys make a diorama of the Golar Formation, or maybe a big model of your Hadrosaur that you're so famous for. Alrighty then, that's about all the questions I've got. Thank you, Andy Farkey, for taking your time out to talk to us for my podunk little YouTube channel. Very informative, and the Hall of Life is now open at the Raymond Alf Museum. I urge you all to come check it out. It's small, but you know, they say big things come in small packages. The exhibits are really well done for a museum of this size. I highly recommend that if you're ever going south towards San Bernardino or north from San Bernardino, I recommend stopping by. It is an awesome place. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Doug.
Isn't he great, folks? Give him a hand. All right then, on to business. Now, just as long as my review has been long coming, so was this hall actually. They had to put it off for a couple of years. I think almost 3, because of budget issues. So I was so relieved to hear a year ago when they said, okay, don't worry, we finally got the scratch to build the new Hall of Life. So, and they were able to put it in over the course of the summer, some from, yeah, like May. Yeah, because they had the Fossil Fest in April. So yeah, basically May through September, and then it opened in October. And it doesn't disappoint. Now, as we talked about in the interview, it is pretty small. I mean, it can fit in, I mean, their entire Hall of Life might fill up half of one of LA's dinosaur halls. And when I originally went through the hall, you know, I was a little disappointed that I wasn't seeing as much, you know, as much from the Alf's collections, because that's usually the case when museums renovate and expand halls, is they want to bring out new, never-before-seen specimens, and they had a few of those in this new Hall of Life, but, you know, just a lot of the old stuff, and, you know, it kind of felt like there wasn't as much on display now as opposed to before they renovated it. But, you know, it's not always about quantity, but quality. And at least on the quality front, they deliver. As Andy explained, because of the circular nature of... Yeah, here we go. As you can see, because of the circular nature of the exhibit hall, they basically went with the standard, you know, chronology. But at least that wasn't just happenstance like, oh, we're around, we're going to make it, you know, just a timeline. But because that originally was Alf's vision, Raymond Alf's vision was to have a walk through time, as he called it, from the stars to early civilization. Let's see. What did I think was the best part? Surprisingly, the Paleozoic section I thought was the best part. Now I say surprisingly because, you know, dinosaurs are so popular, you'd think I'd side with the dinosaurs, or because my main area of interest is the Cenozoic era that I sided with the Cenozoic. But the Paleozoic section was actually really well done, because in the old hall, they didn't really have that much about it. I mean, it had a section, but the specimens were just lacking. With this new one, you know, they got, you know, the oldest known land tracks from Bay of Fundy. They got several trilobites, new trilobites out. Lots of Paleozoic fishes. You know, they even sprung for the model and skeleton of Tiktaalik, the missing link between land and sea. And, you know, like I said, I just thought that was the very well done section, because they had a lot of specimens, they had a great diversity of specimens, and that just overall added to, you know, the story of, you know, the time before the dinosaurs. And speaking of which, then you come into the Mesozoic section, and, you know, again, this is kind of not a whole lot of new stuff on display, but again, that depends who you talk to. Because, I mean, they had the nice little display of stuff from the Kaiparowits, and because I'm so drawn into the idea of dinosaur provincialism, I mean, I could not get enough of that. You know, they had like a little toe bone of a Tyrannosaur, they had turtle shell, even eggshell fragments. You know, just lots of good stuff from the Kaiparowits. And on that note, they're currently working on a Lambeosaurine specimen. Alright, just for those of you not so familiar with the lingo, there's two kinds of hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs. You know, you have the Lambeosaurines, those are the ones with the crests, you know, the big crest on their head like Corythosaurus and Parasaurolophus. And then you have the I am so stupid, I forget the name of the other group. I don't know if it's just hadrosaurines or whatnot, but basically the flat-headed hadrosaurs, like Edmontosaurus and Gripposaurus, stuff like that. But anyway, this new specimen they found is a juvenile Lambeosaurine. You know, I'm not sure how much I should reveal about it, but, you know, without them telling me to, so we'll just leave it at that. But it is a spectacular specimen. I cannot wait to see it. I mean, Andy showed me some pictures last time I was there, and I really think that this baby hadrosaur is going to become kind of a figurehead of the museum, like their mastodon skull and bear dog tracks. You know, a lot of familiar faces in the dinosaur hall. We have the Edmontosaurus specimen that they had found in the Hell Creek Formation, except before it was just the leg was on display, but now they have the leg and the tail somewhat in life position, though. There's a little error there, though, you know, as apparently with space constraints. The tibia, let's see if I can, wait a minute, I'm down in, what am I doing? I'm down in the corner, I can't do anything like that. But if you look at the tibia, which is the shin bone below the femur, it's actually upside down. And I mean, you know, I know the dinosaur and anatomy peers out there are saying, "Oh, this is monumental screw-up, we want their heads on a platter." But as Andy explained to me, that's actually because of space constraint. Apparently, having it right side up in that configuration, there's just I think would have looked kind of anatomically whack. So, but I mean, as long as the layperson doesn't notice it, it's probably not such a big deal. But then again, I just pointed it out, so if you watch this video, you'll probably see it. But anyway, let's see who else. Oh yeah, the Gripposaurus head, skull, from the Kyparowitz. This is this is actually another figurehead of the museum, is this Hadrosaurus skull, because when it was found, you know, it was found to be a new species, Gripposaurus monumentensis. And so this is the holotype specimen, meaning it is the specimen used to erect a new species. I mean, they have found many other Gripposaurus specimens since then, many partial skulls. In fact, the Raymond Alf Museum has a partial skull down in its collections that you may remember it. Andy showed us at Fossil Fest. But so far, this is the best skull of this animal that's been found so far. So not only is this the original skull, it's also the best skull. So Raymond Alf Museum managed to really luck out on that one. The Allosaurus and Centrosaurus are back, and that's probably not surprising, given that they're these large casts, that they're a figurehead, so to speak, of an exhibit. I mean, they're the big eye-grabbing specimen, and I mean, if you have a specimen that big, I mean, obviously just keeping it in storage isn't going to do much good, so I mean, why not display it? And so I guess the same goes for the Camarasaurus leg as well. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, they had a little alcove talking about the, you know, marine animals of the Mesozoic. They have some little marine reptile casts and models, and some actual fossils of ammonites and fish as well. That was pretty cool. They have this research cast of Diabloceratops that you may remember discussing in the interview and stuff. And yeah, that's really all that there is to really discuss in the Hall of Life. I mean, like I said, just so much returning stuff, like the Camarasaurus leg, or even, you know, the Quetzalcoatlus wing, the cast wing there. And then we get into the Cenozoic, and, you know, because this is kind of, how to explain it. You know, when I get really excited about an upcoming exhibition or something, I mean, I will just delve into it. I will try to scrounge every little bit of information I can, every image I can find, and it was no different with the Alf Museum. You know, just like with any other museum, I was constantly, you know, following them on Facebook. I mean, it's probably the first time I've been able to do that for a new museum exhibit, since Facebook has only been around the last few years. So anyway, I followed them on Facebook, every new picture that they gave us, every new little tidbit. Even was following them on Twitter, even though I wasn't actually a Twitter user. I bookmarked their Twitter page just so I could follow the updates. And, I'm just poring over, again, the images and the floor plans. And there actually was quite a lot of stuff going on that they originally had planned. Just for a moment, going back to the Edmontosaurus specimen, I remember, seeing the floor plans and hearing, when they were talking about the museum, that they were going to try and display it in the sort of dig site, as it was when they found it. So I originally imagined it looking like this. And, pardon the crudity of my drawing. I mean, I'm not an artist. I suck at drawing. It's my learning disability at work again. But anyway, so this is originally how I envisioned it, kind of on the, slanted display, with the rock recreated all around it, the skeleton as it was found, and the skin impressions over here. And that's kind of something that puzzled me too, was where were the skin impressions in that display? Though I'm wondering if they left them out because you could see a skin impression over in the Kaiparowitz case, and it would kind of be redundant. But still, though, having a skin impression from the Hell Creek, I mean, yeah, there's lots of skin impressions being found in the Kaiparowitz, but I don't think that any less diminishes the skin impressions that have been found in the Hell Creek. Because, I mean, it could be that the Kaiparowitz environment, was more biased towards preserving soft tissue like that. But considering that, the Kaiparowitz, study of the Kaiparowitz is still in its infancy, that's a question that, it's going to take a very long time to answer. And seeing as, I want to go into the Kaiparowitz someday, look for fossils for my museum, who knows, maybe me or some of my colleagues will be able to figure that mystery out. But anyway, onward. So there was that, exhibit that didn't really turn out the way it was supposed to, I guess you can call it. And another one was, I remember Andy telling me that they were going to have an expanded exhibit on Barstow, and I was just like, awesome! As Barstow, it's a world-class fossil bed. I mean, it's the type locality for the Barstowian land mammal age, basically that stretch of time in North America from 16 million to 13 million years ago. And, because basically, they talk about how the Frick Laboratory at the American Museum of Natural History has the biggest collection of Barstow in the world. It's just, and it's like, so? They don't display any of it. I mean, almost doesn't even exist. I mean, the few people who are going to see it are scientists who, those fossils may pertain to their current research project. So basically, the only people you have to rely on to actually tell you about Barstow are, the Raymond Alf Museum and the San Bernardino County Museum. And because Raymond Alf Museum, they've been going out there since Alf found that peccary skull back in the 30s, 40s, something like that. I think it was the 40s. I can't remember, but it was a long time ago that Alf found that peccary skull out in Barstow. So they actually do have a lot, and as I've noted, they have many notable specimens from Barstow. I mean, they got this partial skull from a large three-toed horse called Megahippus. Their Zegalophodon skull, the only skull of this animal in North America. Their bear dog tracks, that they think are from the big bear dog Amphision, and also this jaw of Zegalophodon, so that they not only have one fossil, but two fossils of Zegalophodon from Barstow. I mean, that's nuts. In fact, Andy told me they have the biggest collection of elephants from Barstow. Apparently pretty rare. And then finally, this articulated camel. So they have lots of stuff from Barstow, lots of great stuff. And so when I heard that there was going to be an expanded exhibit on Barstow, I was ecstatic, because this is such a cool place. I mean, it was like, finally, a Barstow exhibit. And again, this was something of a disappointment. I mean, they had the jaw of Zegalophodon, and then they had a little case of a tortoise shell with two horse jaws, and then the camel. And it's just like, oh man, because, again, this is my overactive imagination. This is me just building stuff in my head, just coming up with idea after idea, and you know, because of my learning disability, I can't necessarily translate it the way I see it in my head, but I managed to do it pretty good here, though. Because this is how I originally imagined it. You know, the fossil exhibit on Barstow would look like. You got the camel, you got the Zegolophodon jaw, you got just like a little mural or poster or whatever, just showing the environment, and then just all sorts of specimens, maybe some cast specimens from other institutions. But like I said, again, it's not always about quantity, but quality, sorry. Quantity, not so much as quality. And, of course, they are having to work with limited space, and they did use that space very well, and I'll get to that in a moment. So there's that, and again, I was hoping to see a larger exhibit on fossils from the Golar Formation, which is something else they have, and it was just, you know, a piece of petrified wood, a turtle shell. Apparently that's important, that turtle shell, because so far most of the fossils found in the Golar are microfossils. They're these little teeth and bones of mammals. And on that front, they also had this little jaw of condylarth, I believe it was called. It was a group of animals. It was a creature called Phenacodus. I can't remember if it was a condylarth or something else. I don't know, taxonomy is not my strong suit. It's going to take me a long time before I can really get a handle on it, but even so. And I can imagine why they might not have had at least as big an exhibit on Barstow, because most of the fossils are small. I mean, you could probably fit them all into that case there, but then you'd need like magnifying glasses to actually show the fossil, and that would take up space, or as I told him, you know, trying to make models of the fossils at several times life size, and that would take up a whole lot more space. But, you know, something is better than nothing. You know, something is better than nothing, and I was glad that they at least had a few out, because they are very important fossils. They're from, you know, the Golar Formation in Kern County. The Golar is the only Paleocene locality west of the Rocky Mountains, so it's a very important locality. The fossils are small, fragmentary, but like I said, they are important because they fill a significant knowledge gap of what, you know, this side of the Rockies was like about 60 million years ago. The Bronithier skulls returned, and again, you know, taking up a lot of space. I would like to see something new, but I mean, they have 7 Bronithier skulls, and that, for a museum that size, that is something to be proud of. So, you know what? I don't care. Go ahead and keep them out there. And then, because this is the section that actually kind of felt was the most stripped down. Because before the renovation, it felt like, you know, the Cenozoic was really strong. They had lots of stuff. They had stuff from the Fayum Depression in Egypt. They had a bunch of Eocene stuff, a lot of Oligocene stuff, and I mean, that's probably still kind of a good part of the exhibit is the Oligocene stuff. Again, get to that in a moment. And the dinosaur section seemed lacking, the Paleozoic really seemed lacking, so, like I said, comparatively, the Cenozoic seemed really stripped down. But, you know, they still got some cool stuff on display. You know, again, lots of Oligocene stuff, like the Denictus here, which apparently was a pain in the ass to move when they were putting it in its new case. You know, you got horse, camel, Oreodont, and then of course the Bronithier bone bed. Right here, yeah. And basically, you know, it concludes talking about, you know, they just have like one little case about human evolution. They got like the terracotta soldier. You know, of course, my museum will talk much more about archaeology, but, you know, that's me. I mean, they are a paleontology museum, whereas I want my museum to be about just the ancient past in general. And, you know, so for their small space, I think they tell the story of life on Earth very well, and I mean, they make very good use of space. Like, for example, remember when I talked about the marine reptile display? It was basically this sort of curved wall out in the middle of the hall, and so you got the marine reptile exhibit here, but then you go to the back of the display, and on the back of the display there's a cladiogram explaining taxonomy and relationships. And like I said, you know, they're very creative and their use of space, having, you know, these curved walls kind of coming out of the wall, main wall, that they could have little exhibit alcoves in. Because not only do you have an exhibit on the inside, but you can also have it on the outside. The two sides there. And also, they made their... this is something I liked. They made their display stands look like rock strata. I mean, it's not like blatant, like, you know, they just copied a wall in the Grand Canyon or somewhere, and I think that was a nice aesthetic touch, really tying into the theme of geology and deep time. And because what this new hall really does well over the old one is explaining paleontology. I mean, they're just quick little blurbs here and there, but they're telling the evolving nature of science. I mean, stuff that we didn't think before. Like, one of my favorites was over here. This guy. Some of you may recognize him, some of you may not. This is a cast of the skull of a dinosaur called Nanotyrannus lancensis. Very contentious little dinosaur, especially since the discovery of Jane in the early 2000s. And he's contentious because there's one camp who thinks that it represents a distinct genus, a sort of pygmy tyrant, you know, half the length of T-Rex, only about maybe a tenth or a fifth of the weight of T-Rex, you know, and where basically T-Rex was, you know, the big apex predator and Nanotyrannus lived in the shadow. But ever since Jane was discovered, you know, the idea that Nanotyrannus is a distinct genus has become the minority, and then the majority of people out there just think that, you know, Nanotyrannus is just a juvenile T-Rex. And I mean, it's a really frustrating debate, because I mean, there's plenty of evidence to suggest it is a juvenile T-Rex, but there's still some of those nagging little doubts, some of those little bits of evidence that say, is it? I mean, there's some stuff here that we don't see in known juvenile T-Rexes, like the shape of the brain and whatnot, and because in fact recently, right here, the Montana dueling dinosaurs, which have been kind of mellowing in a Montana lab for years, getting prepped, the company that has been doing that says that they want to try and find a museum for them, and I mean, I'd love for my museum to get them. I mean, that'd be a great tool to, you know, attract attention to us, you know, to fundraise and stuff, and plus just because it's an incredible specimen and it's so awesome. You know, I've even egged Andy at the Alf Museum to try and take them in, but I'm not sure the Alf has the resources and manpower to process multi-ton blocks containing the articulated skeletons of two dinosaurs. But anyway, I get ahead of myself. The Tyrannosaur specimen here, according to Pete Larson and Rob Bacher, they think this is Nanotyrannus. Until we get it out of the rock, we won't know for sure if this is truly a Nanotyrannus or just a juvenile T-Rex. You know, but potentially this specimen, according to them, has the potential to resolve the debate. So only time will tell what happens to those guys. And so, like I said, you know, that was a big theme throughout the hall, and it was just explaining the origin of life, and also it was prevalent, you know, in the Mesozoic section, though, really talking about trying to figure out how animals behaved, ancient environments, and stuff like that. You know, and speaking of which, you know, I was kind of dismayed to see their Velociraptor model, because I mean, the student who made it probably put a lot of effort into it, but I mean, it just looks like the ones in Jurassic Park. But luckily, you know, the Alf had the foresight to actually use it as a teaching tool, saying the difference between perceptions of dinosaurs and what we think they actually looked like. And because, of course, next to it was a little cast of Archaeopteryx showing that, you know, this Velociraptor should at least have feathers, because we now know Velociraptor had feathers. Not just because of its relationship to birds, but because we actually have found Velociraptor bones that have evidence of feathers. And then, let's see what else. Oh yeah. This is probably the best part in the entire hall. Was they actually installed these 3 cases devoted to changing exhibits. And this is just incredible. I cannot believe they're doing this. Basically, this is where they'll have fossils on display for a time, and then so far the theme seems to be new discoveries. When they find new fossils, they'll put them in there, and then when they find something else, You know, they'll put that in there instead. And this is just, like I said, incredible because, I mean, one, it guarantees that every visit to the Alf may not be the same. You may see some new fossils in the case. I mean, two, it's, in a sense, keeping you, if you really like the Alf and follow it like I do, it's keeping you up to date on their activities and just what they're finding out there, what they're doing. You know, because the Los Angeles Museum, as part of their next campaign, you know, getting ready for their centennial next year, renovated the rotunda to have changing exhibits in it. And they said, you know, that this will, you know, encourage people to ask questions and investigate. And it is kind of cool, but, you know, there's just one problem with it. I've seen the exact same specimens in those cases for almost 2 years. And the Alf Museum, I mean, you know, I saw some specimens in there, you know, a couple weeks after the hall opened in October of 2011, like, you know, horse hooves, you know, a discombobulated camel jaw, this endocast of a hadrosaur skull, endocast meaning that's a natural cast of the brain, so we actually get to maybe see the structure of a hadrosaur brain, and these prehistoric eggs from Wyoming, and, of course, their Zegalophodon skull. But that was because they had just published a paper on it and wanted to show that off. And then, like, 4 months later, or was it 6? I don't know. So basically that was in October, and then when I went back in April, you know, this April spring break a couple weeks ago, except for the eggs, I mean, there were completely new fossils in the case. You know, they had some recent stuff from Barstow, like, you know, this horse jaw, this jaw from a little animal called an oreodont, you know, an early relative of sheep and goats. They had this little carnivore jaw, which I think may be from a dog called Synarctus. And then, probably the coolest of them all, was this articulated foot of a three-toed horse. And then, not only did you have all these new Barstow fossils, because, I mean, if I didn't make it clear earlier, I love Barstow stuff, they also had a case filled with what I can only guess are dinosaur bones. And I'm not exactly sure. I mean, the only real Mesozoic place that they're active right now is the Kyparoliths. And these kind of look like maybe juvenile hadrosaurs, but I mean, I asked, are these from your juvenile hadrosaur, the Lambeosaurian I mentioned earlier, and he said, no, that's something different. So I might just have to pester Andy about that, just what that is. But I mean, like I said, this is just so cool that they said that these are going to be changing exhibits, and have actually stuck with it. They actually rotate fossils in and out, you know. So again, there's something new every time. It's showing you new and exciting discoveries. Because I always thought that if I can get my museum off the ground and we were actually out there finding stuff, is that I'd try and do something like that. You know, a changing exhibit, I mean, even if it's not new material, still try and show some lesser-seen stuff from the collections. And so, you know, the Raymond Alf Museum did that. That's what I hope to try and do someday. And so, I mean, there's that, and then finally I wanted to show you... Ignore the dogs. Anyway, because on spring break I visited the Alf and I chatted with Andy for a little bit, but, you know, mainly I gave him some fossils, some of the invertebrate material I've been finding at Shell Creek and Rincon Hill, just because, I mean, I had some extra stuff, and because I love helping the museum, I love helping these smaller museums, and, you know, Andy's just cool enough that he warrants donations. But anyway, in exchange, I mean, he didn't have to, but I mean, he insisted. In exchange, he gave me these excess fossil casts, and I know the light's washing them out, I'll zoom in a moment. But basically, he said that, you know, because they had casted a couple specimens that are on display, and I guess these were to use up excess material, or these were just extras he had. You know, but the first one is this trilobite. You see this trilobite, you know, Paleozoic arthropod, you know, kind of iconic of the prehistoric past. And then the other is this early lungfish from like 300 million years ago, something like that, the Pennsylvanian era, I believe. And they're very cool. I mean, I have to paint them, but They're just so awesome. You know, not just because they're specimens that are on display in the hall, but I mean just because that they are from the collections of the Alf Museum. I mean, this isn't just like those standard fossil casts that you can just go buy on the internet, that there are various companies that sell them, like Skulls Unlimited, Bay State Replicas, Valley Anatomical, Prehistoric Planet, Gaston Design, etc., etc. Because, I mean, that is the thing with fossil casts, is that you can make a mold and you can make lots of them and sell them all sorts of places, or maybe lots of people can sell them. But, I mean, to have a fossil from the collections and it was given to me. I mean, I didn't have to buy it. It was given to me by their paleontology curator. That is just freaking awesome. I love it. Thank you so much, Andy. So, I've probably babbled incoherently enough, but, you know, there you have it. The new Hall of Life at the Raymond Alf Museum of Paleontology in Claremont, California. If you're ever in the area, in fact, if you are in just the LA area, basically, go see this museum. It is small, but it packs a serious punch. It is a really cool little museum. You know, it's the only museum on a high school campus, so I mean that alone should be reason enough to go visit it. And so I'll see you next week for the third installment, when we look at fossils that were, interestingly enough, found in a trash pile. See you next time!